You mentioned sacredness.
Yes.
I'd like to go into that a little.
Uh-huh, okay.
What do you mean by the sacred?
Right. I mean, when I say that, and I, as always, I speak completely from my own experience. I don't assume that it has to be exactly commensurate with anybody else's experience. But if this resonates for you, then when I use that word sacred, it refers to a sense of kind of an enlivened sense of presence, a sense that there's a benign quality, and perhaps more than benign, an actual loving quality to whether it's a sense of a particular place, a particular movement. I think some movements have a kind of sacredness to them, where there's a coalescing of morality that is just natural, a real natural ethic that comes whereby people say enough of this to something that is unfair, unjust, horrible, and enough people gather together with their will and their beautiful energy to make a change. Then it usually requires sacrifice, and you can see those kinds of things look sacred to me. They look that looks like something, you know, beautiful about evolution, that as Martin Luther King said, no lie can live forever, that at some point, you know, it's the enough already starts to occur. And I think there are certainly just acts, individual acts, that have a sacredness to it. You know, you see an act of totally selfless mercy, and you just think, wow. And frankly, you know, there's this story I heard, my friend Sam Harris told me, that I could actually weep whenever I think about it, but it's an experiment. And by the way, the experiment itself was unethical, in my opinion. But it's an experiment where they took two primates, whether they were chimpanzees or gorillas or something, and they put them in two separate rooms, in two separate cages next to each other. And whenever they would feed one, they would give an electric shock to the other one. And at the point that the first one, who is not even related to the other, they're just in two cages next to each other, at the point that that first one who's being fed the food realizes the connection of his friend being shocked, he stops eating. He stops eating until he's almost starved, and then he eats only enough to stay alive.
Wow.
Isn't
So
it?
monkeys know sacredness.
Yes, yes, yes. And monkeys know compassion and mercy. So this is not a man-made, you don't need a religion. They don't have a religion. You only need your own good heart. And as you relax and are in your own sweet spot, your own goodness, your own ease of being, your own sweetness, your generosity, your kindness, your discernment and your authenticity, your unwillingness to compromise your integrity gets stronger and stronger.
The notion of divinity trumping the material world
Yes.
is something that you brought up. And I think
Yes.
that's very central to religion,
Yes, it
isn't
is.
it?
Yeah.
That divinity is somehow other
Right.
than this. Could you
That
talk about that?
divinity, the divinity part is what matters, and usually meaning a transcendent realm that is not here.
Right.
Um, and it trumps matter, that being this very life, right? So, as though this life, you know, like I said before, as though this life is just not that important, and some other magical, in the sky, somewhere else life is the one that matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't buy it. I think that the only divinity we're going to know is through this body and on this earth. This is our divinity. And I think that from another vantage point of understanding what divinity might actually be, the manifestation that we're here witnessing, the fact that in these little tender forms that are of a relatively short amount of time, there is so much love. I mean, really, you know, when you really let it in, it's just it's almost unbearable, And to think that here in this little blink in time, all this love is compacted, that's pretty divine.
Mm-hmm.
That's very divine.
Absolutely. I think one of the reasons that people have to go to the divine, which obviously is the fear of death.
Yes.
Can you talk a little about how the fear of death plays into spiritual myths and spiritual myth making?
Well, I think that the fear of death is the reason why there are all these myths and stories about the afterlife.
Mm.
And so it assuages that fear. It's basically saying you don't really die. I mean, most of the preachers and the ministers and the priests, when they're doing a service, a memorial service or a funeral service, it's all about how you're going to be reunited with your loved one. They're telling the living they're going to be reunited. And it's a very nice story to believe. I mean, then, it takes the sting out of death. But so one can easily understand why somebody would grab onto that, that belief. But if you just don't buy it, right?
Right.
Then you're left with saying goodbye forever.
Mm. Mm.
Like that Kerouac line, accept loss forever.
Mm.
That's a different matter. And that, again, it makes your connection to this life and to your loved ones all the more precious. You really do realize any moment could be the last one.